The public education system is an abject failure, a complete disaster, and the founding of the Department of Education itself marks the beginning of the end of a public education model in the United States that actually functioned. So this lady is a victim of the Department of Education and is giving you a justification. Nothing in the world says we need to eliminate the Department of Education more than listening to a woman who has clearly been victimized by the Department of Education. Listen to this insane take on the fact that we are getting rid of the Department of Education at the federal level.
So today, we're going to talk about Trump ending education.
Do you even need to watch any more of this video? Trump is ending education because before 1979, when the Department of Education was founded, we apparently didn't have education. It just didn't exist. There was no education prior to that.
The Supreme Court ruled that Trump can
Now here she gets into some of the Supreme Court stuff and overturning lower court orders, and she reads Sotomayor's, or goes over Sotomayor's dissent. But things get interesting here at about the 2-minute mark.
Trump's move and the Supreme Court's ruling clearly tells American youth that education is not a national priority.
Because if you know anything about America's youth, it's this. They are very, very dialed in to what's going on with the Supreme Court. It's really at the top of their list. I'm sure that kids who were dedicated to studying and learning and preparing for their future want nothing more than to throw their books in the trash now that the Supreme Court is allowing Donald Trump to dismantle the Department of Education at the federal level. Clearly, that was the motivation for them to stay up late and to study and to work hard. And now they can just go, well, if Trump doesn't like education, because he's destroying an enterprise that started in 1979. And by the way, since the founding of the Department of Education, every single metric you would use to track educational or academic success has fallen, and across the board. So maybe it's not a terrible idea to get the federal government out of the education business altogether.
We'll have different states regulate hazardous materials on.
So she goes into this thing where she starts talking about all these different other departments at the federal level that, you know, maybe returning the education back to the states is a good idea. Maybe we should deregulate federally across the board. Hey, don't threaten me with a good time, lady. I would love it. Please return it all to the states. Shrink the federal government back to what it was supposed to be at the founding.
Graduate and are running it. This move tells your kids that education does not matter.
It really does. It really does. My 12-year-old is heartbroken over this Supreme Court decision.
Is less important than garbage.
Actual
Literally,
garbage.
Garbage being transported across state lines gets federal oversight.
Brings a tear to your eye, doesn't it?
Some states will continue to focus on education and produce the middle class. Some states won't, and will create a class that can be more easily controlled by the billionaires who spend.
Now here's where things get spicy. Guys and gals, the public education system as we know it was designed by the Rockefellers to create factory workers. That is our modern public education system. That's the deal. That's the reality of it. The system she is defending was designed by billionaires to create workers, not critical thinkers. Yes, states are going to have different standards, and that's a really, really good thing, because you know what parents tend to do? They tend to try and live in good school districts. And if one state has really good education and another state has poor education, parents are probably going to look at that. More importantly, education shouldn't have anything to do with government, period, other than if you believe we should be funding education as part of our common good for society. The money should go from the taxpayer to the parent, who can then pursue freely their child's education. There are dozens, probably hundreds of places competing for educational dollars and ways to educate children and innovating that. But since we all have to pay for public education and all of our kids have to go to public schools, except unless you're rich and you can get into a private school, this innovation is very limited to internet spaces. And we all know, and nobody wants to say it, I think, that we could completely replace public education tomorrow with YouTube. Sorry that's true. IXL, Khan Academy, all these different entities are trying to come up with innovative new ways to integrate technology into learning and letting kids explore ideas and whatnot independently. And we're still putting kids in a classroom with a teacher standing in front of them doing repetitive tasks and basic memorization. We're not teaching them how to use the new technological tools. We're not teaching them entrepreneurship. We're not teaching them how money works. We're not teaching them how taxes work. We're not teaching them any of that. The public education system is an abject failure, a complete disaster, and the founding of the Department of Education itself marks the beginning of the end of a public education model in the United States that actually functioned. So this lady is a victim of the Department of Education and is giving you a justification as to why it should be ended. Thank you and have a nice day.